I've been filming content for YouTube for over a year now, and in that time I've made a lot of food for my family. So I thought it'd be fun to do a compilation and show you some examples of the food we eat throughout the seasons. Every meal has gluten and dairy-free options, and my hope for this video is that you will get some inspiration for meals for your family, all while enjoying some lovely music and maybe getting some things done in your kitchen while you watch. So let's get started in autumn. I make a lot of food that is in a sauce or a stew or a soup because it's easy for me to make it early in the afternoon and heat it up when we're ready to eat. But sometimes I really enjoy a roast, and I especially love roast pork. So to prepare roast pork, I'm just drizzling some oil, seasoning it with salt and pepper, and then I will cook it in the oven at 180 degrees. I'm going to serve this with mashed potatoes, obviously not for my little boy that's got a potato allergy. He'll have to have something else. I'm just peeling the potatoes and cutting them up quite small so that they'll cook quickly. I put the potatoes in cold water, I put some salt in the water, and then turn it on to bring it up to the boil, and when it's boiling I cook the potatoes for between 15 and 20 minutes depending on how big they are. Now I don't know about you, but I love reading books that describe meals and food that people are eating. And one of my favourite books for that is Farmer Boy from Little House on the Prairie. I don't know if you've ever read that book. It's so much fun to read. And I remember one of the scenes, he describes a meal that he's having with fried apples and onions. And ever since I read that, I've been wanting to try fried apples and onions. And this is the first time I've got around to it. It's not onions. These are, I think they're called scallions in English. It's a cross between an onion and a shallot, which is actually really nice with this because they're a little bit sweeter. So I'm just frying up those scallions and apples. That was so delicious. I just added a bit of salt. That was all it needed. A couple of bay leaves as well. So good. I will definitely be doing that again. So I'm just mashing up those potatoes. I've boiled up some green beans to go with it too. I'm going to add some milk and some butter to these potatoes, but before I do that I will take some out for my little boy that can eat potatoes but can't eat dairy. And actually, to be perfectly honest, when he came home from work, my husband redid these potatoes, adding a lot more milk and a lot more butter because he likes it that way, and to be honest it is much better that way. These were a bit dry when I did them, but anyway, he sorted it out when he came home and they were delicious. This was a really, really tasty dinner and definitely one that I'll be doing again. I'm starting by doing a dry rub on some chicken thighs. So I'm just adding whatever herbs and spices I think will taste good together. So some paprika, some garlic, some parsley, some thyme, and I'm gonna add some salt and let that sit while I prepare the vegetables. Now this is going to be just a basic oven bake, really. So I'm going to chop up loads and loads of vegetables, put them in that baking dish that you can see there. I'll cook the vegetables first and then add the chicken thighs on the top of the vegetables when they've cooked down a little bit, and leave that to cook for another probably half an hour or so. So I love this kind of meal. It's so simple. It just really involves cooking vegetables, adding a bit of seasoning, and then the oven does all of the hard work. And I can serve that on its own with bread or with rice. And it ends up just being a really healthy, nutrient-dense dinner for everybody. So in terms of the vegetables, I'm going to go with more summer vegetables this time. And it's really what I had in the fridge. So courgettes, peppers. I had half a squash left over and I put that in too, some onions and some other things that you'll see me chop up here. I'm chopping them up into 1 centimetre cubes, I suppose, just so that it'll cook quite quickly. And this ends up being more of a ratatouille than a roasted vegetable dish, because when you add a lot of vegetables into a baking dish like that, it cooks down and makes more of a sauce. So if you want a drier, more caramelized one, you need to probably add less vegetables and spread them out on a baking tray. And I do that quite often because we do like roast vegetables, but today I wanted to have a lot of vegetables in there, and this was a really good way to just pack in a load of vegetables. I'm not really following a recipe. In fact, all of the recipes this week are really off the top of my head with what I've got in the fridge. And, I've got a vague idea of where I'm going with it when I start, but I'm kind of making it up as I go along. And to be honest, you can really do that with a lot of savoury recipes. You don't need to follow a recipe closely. You can see what you have, imagine what might go well together, and if you've got a few principles of how to roast vegetables, for example, or how long it takes to cook meat in an oven, or that kind of thing, if you have just a few skills, then you are really able to pull together a very, very simple meal without having to follow a recipe, without having to buy lots of fancy ingredients. And it does end up tasting really good, and there's such a sense of satisfaction when you know that this has just come out of your imagination, and when everybody's really enjoying it, you think, I made that, that's mine, and I'm really proud of it. So as you saw, in here I've got courgettes, aubergines, peppers, tomatoes, which are going to make a really good sauce. I've got some squash in there. I added a few cloves of garlic, and I'm putting a lot of olive oil in there just so that it'll really add some good healthy fat. Lots of salt. I didn't actually add enough salt. We had to add more when we were eating it. So make sure you do add enough salt. Don't be scared of salt. It is not bad for you. If you have too much of it in pre-prepared food, then it is bad for you. But when you're adding your own salt, you really need to make sure that you get that flavour there, and your body does need salt. So I put that in the oven for half an hour so that it would start cooking. So there are a lot of vegetables there. And as you can see, the vegetables have started to soften down, but they do need to cook further. So now I'm going to place the spiced chicken thighs on top of there and put it in the oven for another half an hour. Now, if I was going to be doing this again, I would probably let the vegetables cook for 45 minutes, put the chicken on and just let the chicken cook for 20 minutes because it was a little bit overdone. So you live and learn. If I make this again, I will definitely be cooking the vegetables longer on their own and adding the chicken later. Now this does look like a lot of food, and it is, but if you've been following me for a while, you'll know that my children have food allergies, and so they have to take food to school every day. And so what I tend to do is I make double the amount that we will actually eat in the evening, and then they can take leftovers the next day to school. And that works really well for us. They get a good healthy lunch. I don't have to rely on pre-made food because in any case I can't, because there's nothing that they can eat that I can buy pre-made. So this is a really good system for us. I tend to make the dinner early afternoon. Then I'm available for them when they come home from school. We can do homework together, and I just warm up the dinner in the evening when everybody's home and ready to eat. Here in France, Wednesdays can be quite rushed because the children don't have school and they have lots of activities. So I like to make food that is either really quick that I can pull together in the evening, or that slow cooks throughout the afternoon or even the whole day. And the other thing about Wednesdays here is our butcher's has a special offer on ground beef. So I always go and buy my ground beef in the morning, and we usually have spaghetti bolognese or lasagna, or I make a beef stroganoff with ground beef. We have that kind of thing on a Wednesday and everybody enjoys it. But one of our favourite things to make with ground beef is this chili. So here I am pre-cooking the white beans and the black beans that are going to make that ground beef go a little bit further. And while they're cooking in the Instant Pot, so they will cook for 30 minutes in the Instant Pot, while they're cooking, I'm frying up the onions and the ground beef. I would normally use fresh onions in this recipe, but I was a little bit short of time, so since I had some frozen onions in the freezer, I decided to use those. You just brown off the onions, and when they're slightly brown and softened, you can add the meat and brown that meat off before adding the garlic and the spices. So you may notice that I don't generally fry the garlic with the onions because I find that it browns the garlic too quickly and it doesn't give it a good taste. I much prefer adding garlic when there's already plenty of other things in the pot so that the nice fresh garlic taste remains. I'll fry that off just for 30 seconds, a minute, something like that, before I add paprika, coriander and cumin. As I said earlier, I like to fry off these spices just a little bit so that their flavours can develop. So I let them fry with the meat for a minute, and then I'm going to turn the heat off and wait until the beans are done before I can assemble the chili. Now that the beans are done, I'm going to strain them. I usually rinse them I don't know if I can use the liquid of these beans or not. I need to find out really. I know that kidney beans you can't use the cooking liquid, but I'm not sure about black beans and these white beans. If you know, let me know in the comments. I'm putting them straight back in the Instant Pot, and I'm going to add the meat and the tomato and the bone broth and let that cook on slow cook. Oh, it was probably 6 hours, even maybe a little bit longer than that. Now, in the past, I've not been impressed with the slow cook function of the Instant Pot. But this time I took off the seal, which I think meant that there was more evaporation that happened and the flavours were a lot more concentrated this time. So maybe that's something to bear in mind when you're slow cooking with the Instant Pot. Take the seal off and see if you think that makes a difference. Now, one thing I really love about chili, and is especially good for our family that has some people with food allergies, is that you can put plenty of different toppings on the table and people can just help themselves to the toppings they prefer or the toppings that fit with their dietary needs. So I usually serve it with sauerkraut, avocado, cheddar cheese, some cream, maybe some fermented peppers, lots of different things. Tonight it was avocado, carrot salad and cheddar. Again, I was just using what I had already in the cupboards. I didn't want to buy anything, especially for this dinner, so I'm using up what I've got. It was really tasty, and in fact those carrots with the chili went really well and everybody thoroughly enjoyed it. This is one of my favourite soup recipes. You can really put whatever vegetables you like in it, but I like to use lots of root vegetables. And today I'm also adding some butternut squash that I had left over in the fridge. As always with soups, there's a lot of vegetable preparation that needs to go on. So I'm preparing onions, carrots, swede, leeks, and of course the butternut squash. Swede is one of those long forgotten vegetables, but I think it's so tasty in a soup mixed with other vegetables. Another way that I really enjoy eating it is steamed, then mixed with butter and pepper and baked in the oven. My dad used to make this every Sunday for Sunday lunch and it was so good. I have to say I don't like swede when it's just boiled in a stew or anything like that. But when it's mixed with other vegetables and pureed, it adds so much flavour. Give it a go if you find some swede in your local supermarket. Buy some and add it to your next soup and see what you think. Adding salt to your soup is very important, and this might look like a lot of salt, but there's an awful lot of liquid going in there and there's no other source of salt. This is homemade broth. I made it using a pig's head, which I didn't enjoy particularly, but the broth has a really good flavour. It is not salted, so I have to make sure that I really season my dishes when I'm using this broth really, really well. So I'm adding salt, plenty of salt, and plenty of freshly ground black pepper. Bring that to the boil and then leave it to simmer for about 30 minutes until the vegetables are nice and soft. I like to take out 2 scoops of vegetables with a slotted spoon, leave them to one side, and then I'll use an immersion blender to puree the soup directly in the pot. Just make sure you turn the heat off the soup first. I puree that until it's really smooth. It makes a lovely thick soup, and then I add these vegetables bits back. I'm also going to be adding a little bit of meat that I got from the pig's head when I boiled it to make the stock. There's not a lot of meat here, but it will give a little bit of extra flavour and texture to the soup. I'm going to serve this with some cheese scones that I made earlier on. You can get the recipe for those over on the blog. I will link them below. They're really tasty with this soup. I love the savoury flavour of those cheese scones and this creamy, delicious soup. It goes together so well. I'm preparing the salmon, which is going to roast in the oven while the pastry blind bakes. To blind bake the pastry, I make sure that my quiche dish is very well buttered. I'm going to roll out the pastry until it's slightly bigger than the quiche dish, and then I'm going to push the pastry into the quiche dish, prick it with a fork, remove any excess from over the top, put some baking parchment on top of the pastry and then some lentils on top of that. You can also use dried beans or even baking beads, which do the same job. And then that will bake in the oven for 15 minutes on 200 degrees Celsius. So the water's just coming to a simmer now, and I've got some frozen asparagus here, and I'm going to cook the asparagus for just 5 minutes in the simmering water, not boiling, so that they're tender but not overcooked, because they will continue cooking in the quiche. If you're using fresh asparagus, you might find that you need to cook them for a little bit less than 5 minutes. Now to make the filling you need 4 eggs, 3 tablespoons of flour, 400 millilitres of milk, and a little bit of salt. And you can find the recipe for this over on the blog. Whisk it really well to make sure that there's no lumps of flour, and then I just leave that on the work surface while everything else is being cooked and ready, and then I will add it to the quiche at the end. With every quiche I make, I like to smother the base with mustard. It adds so much flavour. Even to delicate fish, it doesn't overpower it, it just adds a really big punch of flavour, which we love. I flake the salmon onto the quiche base, and then I'm going to add some grated cheese to the egg and milk mixture, and I'll pour all of that over the salmon into the quiche. I like to make sure that the cheese is spread out evenly throughout the quiche, so I just move it around a little bit with a spatula, and then I'm going to arrange the asparagus on the top. This will bake in the oven for another 20 to 25 minutes until it's all golden brown. Now, because my boys are still dairy free, even though they can eat some gluten right now, I am going to be making them a crustless quiche, which is basically an omelette that I cook in the oven. So I'm whisking up some eggs, putting the rest of the salmon in the pan, pouring over the egg mixture, and then I'm going to bake that. I think it was about 10 minutes in the oven at 180 degrees Celsius. This was an absolutely delicious evening meal. It was full of the flavours of spring, and we really enjoyed it with some carrot salad. Tonight's meal is one of my favourites. It's beef stroganoff, but made with minced beef. Wednesday is a chaotic day for me. The children have their activities, I have to do a lot of driving, and in the evening I'm pretty tired. I don't want to make anything complicated, and this is a great meal for that kind of day. Simply fry the onions and the mincemeat together, add those delicious mushrooms, let it fry down, put some salt, some pepper in there. You can add some herbs too if you like. I like to add fresh thyme and a little bit of water to help the meat cook and give a bit of a liquid. I also like to add plenty of garlic because that adds so much flavour. I'm preparing this meal earlier on in the day because I know that this evening it's going to be mad, so I want to get as much done as I can beforehand. So I'm going to let this cook down for about half an hour, and then tonight I will take out a little bit for my boys who are allergic to milk, and then to their portion I will add a little bit of coconut cream, and to the rest I'm going to add some spinach and some crème fraîche, which is fermented cream, so it's a bit like sour cream. You can use sour cream as an alternative, or else you could also use some double cream. That would be really good too. Then I'll just let the cream melt and warm up, and I'm going to serve this with rice. I love this meal. I love mushrooms, and I think it tastes amazing. Even as someone who loves cooking, there are some weeks that it's just really difficult to get dinner on the table. And this is one of those weeks. My husband is travelling with work, I'm on my own with the children, and to top it all, I'm suffering really badly from seasonal allergies, especially the evening that you're seeing right here. So that's why you're not going to see my face in this particular evening, because my eyes are extremely red and I'm feeling really poorly. In weeks like this, it's really important to have an arsenal of very quick meals that you can whip up in no time and with very little effort. I have a lot of recipes like this that I like to pull from just when I know that I'm going to be really busy. That way I know that I'm not going to have to fall back on ready-made food or rush out to get takeaway. I can always whip up something for my family, which is very important for us because there is actually very little industrial food or restaurant food that my children can eat with their food allergies. So I do like to have several meals like this that are just really easy and quick to make. This evening's dinner is an incredibly easy one. You literally just fry some vegetables. So tonight I'm doing courgette and onion, and in the time that it takes to cook the pasta, the vegetables are nice and soft. In a separate pan I'm frying up some ham, and then when the vegetables are done I'm going to add some cream. Before I add the cream, I make sure to take some of the sauce out for my boys who are allergic to dairy, and I will be serving their sauce on some rice instead of on pasta. Now, to make this very simple dish a little bit more exciting, I like to add some Parmesan cheese on the top and also a sprinkle of lemon zest. Now, this is a really good tip. It brings so much flavour to a creamy pasta dish, and we really enjoy it. And that ham on the top there, just delicious. It really adds that little extra something. So tonight I'm making taco bowls. I've got some ground beef that is frying here, and I'm going to be adding some spices to that, and I'm just going to chop up a few vegetables and make a couple of different toppings to go on it. I'm not cooking anything except for the meat and the rice. It's a really simple, very quick meal that is absolutely delicious and everybody enjoys. I'm going to make a really simple guacamole. I don't even know if you can call it guacamole. I'm just going to crush these avocados, add a little bit of lemon and some salt, and that's it. As you can tell, these avocados were not the best. They were going brown, they were not great. But guacamole is a really good way to use avocados that are not perfect, because you're mashing them up anyway. The brown bits don't make much of a difference. I'm also making a little bit of a tomato salsa. Just by chopping up some tomatoes, I'm going to add a squeeze of lemon, some salt, and at the end I'm going to add some coriander just for a bit of extra freshness. So while the meat is browning, I'm going to add some smoked paprika, a whole lot of smoked paprika. We love that flavour. A little bit of ground coriander, I'd say about a teaspoon. About a teaspoon of cumin. And about a teaspoon of garlic. I'm just going to stir that together and let it cook down for a while. Now, I'm making this earlier on in the day, but if you were to make it in the evening, This would all probably be done in the time that it takes for you to cook your rice. So I would suggest getting your rice on, getting your meat frying, and then once that's frying and going and cooking, you can get your toppings ready. I've got 2 things left to prepare. Some pickled onions, and I'm going to grate some cheese, and then it'll be done and ready for dinner. And I forgot the salt. Definitely need salt. I make these pickled onions just by slicing up some red onions, adding about a teaspoon of salt, a tablespoon of sugar, and just about covering the onions with vinegar. I like to use apple cider vinegar for this. I do have a recipe over on the blog for pickled carrots, so check that out if you're interested. Now, grating cheese is one of my least favourite jobs to do in the kitchen, and you're about to see why. It ends up being a lot more work than it should be because this happens. And now I have to clean it all up, and it's taking about 5 minutes more than it should. But anyway, these things happen. It's fine. I still managed to get dinner ready before I needed to go out to work. It's just, I really hate grating cheese. And here is the final dinner. It was really delicious. There's so much colour on the plate between the tomatoes, the onions, the avocado. It makes a really delicious dinner that's very healthy and everybody enjoys. And you can add whichever toppings you like. So if there are food allergies in your family, it makes it really easy for everyone to put what they enjoy and can eat on their plate. Thank you for watching all the way to the end of this long video. I hope I gave you plenty of ideas. And if you're looking for more inspiration, I make videos every week on homemade food from scratch, allergy-friendly meal ideas, and lots of sourdough. So don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.